Ray, how many times do I have to tell you? Don't call me when I'm on a business trip. This isn't the time for that. Listen carefully, Tom, the truth is. Stop, that's enough, shut up. Don't speak without my permission. I'm about to have an important business meeting. Don't drag your husband down, especially when you're his wife. Tom, as usual, spoke in a cold tone and was about to hang up. I made sure to say this clearly. Then, I won't call you again. Don't regret it later. I'm already regretting marrying a useless woman like you. I have no other regrets. Goodbye. Tom hung up in his usual indifferent tone. I tried calling again, but it seemed he had turned off his phone. Maybe I should have tried harder to stop him, but I had reached my limit. Tom, you will regret this. You can see it coming. The moment you didn't listen to me, it was over. Most importantly, you don't understand anything. I know everything. Feeling pity for my husband in my mind, I headed to my in-laws' house. A week later, I was eagerly getting ready. Today is the day my husband comes back. I must greet him in the best condition as his wife. Because today is a once-in-a-lifetime important day. I'm home. Welcome back, dear. How was the business trip? As usual, it went smoothly. Where's Mom? I don't see her. She's in the back. My husband tossed his luggage at me with a huff. Normally, my mother-in-law and I would both greet him together. He's probably thinking, how dare they neglect their son? With a slightly rough stride, my husband walked into the living room and immediately stopped. There, gathered, were his younger brother Kevin and his uncle, Ty, along with other relatives. Everyone was dressed in black mourning clothes. And in Ty's hand was a framed photo of my mother-in-law. Kevin, what on earth is this? Why are all the relatives gathered at our house suddenly? And what's with those clothes? You're even holding Mom's picture, it's like a funeral. This is too much, even for a prank. I can't believe you can even mention the word prank in this situation. Mom really passed away. The wake and the funeral are already done. Today is the 7th day memorial. For you, it might feel like the first day without Mom, though. What? What are you talking about? Still don't get it? Well, I guess it makes sense. You seem to care about nothing. I tried contacting you multiple times. Ray must have called too. But you never answered or called back, even though I left messages saying it was important. Where were you, and what were you doing? Kevin's tone was calm, but it was clear he was angry at my husband. Even though my husband was confused by the sudden situation, he quickly put on a composed front. I see, that was indeed a significant event. Since Dad is already gone, as the eldest son, it should have been my responsibility to handle the funeral and other arrangements. I'm sorry for putting that burden on you. But I've been on a business trip. I had a crucial meeting with Haring Corporation. You know how important that was, right? I know you're usually busy and might not be able to answer the phone all the time. But if your wife calls during a business trip, wouldn't you at least wonder why? If it were me, I'd check it out as soon as I had a moment, even if it was just a text. Kevin understood that Haring Corporation is a major company, and that my husband had secured a contract with them, so it was important. But from Kevin's perspective, it didn't justify being completely out of touch with the family. Unlike my husband, Kevin has a reasonable sense of values, and I'm grateful for that. About that. Yes, Ray called, and I answered. She is my beloved wife, after all. But she didn't mention anything about Mom. She just talked about random things. I was busy, so I thought it wasn't urgent and ended the call. My husband deliberately put on a pained expression as he lied. This behavior doesn't surprise me anymore. I've known what kind of man he is since we got married. Calmly, I countered. I didn't tell you anything? That's news to me. I called, but all you did was tell me to shut up and didn't listen to a word I said. Don't push your blame onto me just because you're at fault. I'm not blaming you, I'm just stating the facts. You didn't inform me about anything important on that call. That's why I didn't know about Mom's death. That's all there is to it. I tried to tell you. Ray, stop lying. That's not what's important right now. I missed Mom's funeral. Because of you, I didn't get to say goodbye to her. I'm her son. How are you going to take responsibility for that? My husband spoke in a monotonous voice, but his furrowed brow and the anger in his eyes made it clear he was blaming me. It's absurd to try and shift the responsibility for his own neglect onto someone else. Determined to confront him, I took out my phone and played a recording. Stop, that's enough, shut up. Don't speak without my permission. I'm about to have an important business meeting. Don't drag your husband down, especially when you're his wife. It was the conversation I had with him during his business trip. I had recorded everything. Why do you have this recording? It must be fake, yeah, it has to be a fake. How else could you produce evidence so conveniently? Normal couples don't record their conversations. Well, I do. Because you've been verbally abusing me for a long time. What? Kevin interrupted, shocked by the revelation. Even my husband flinched. Ray, don't make things up. You're confusing everyone. I feel bad that I missed Mom's funeral. I'm sure you felt awkward without your husband there. But don't lie out of spite. Wait, brother. When there are conflicting stories, a third party should fairly judge. We need to listen to Ray's side too. I'm also curious about this, could you explain the detail? Tyler said, leaning forward for the first time. My husband stepped back. I decided to share everything openly. Since our marriage, Tom has always looked down on me as useless. I admit I'm not very efficient, and I felt it was my duty to make our home comfortable. So, I endured it for a while. But eventually, I decided to gather evidence of his abuse. I met both of you many times and had no idea. Tom never shows his true colors in public, so it's no surprise you didn't know. That's why I needed undeniable proof for a third party. I've been recording our conversations with an app and keeping all his nasty emails. Didn't you talk to my sister about this? I might be biased as her brother, but she wouldn't stand for such behavior. Tyler asked cautiously, understanding the delicate nature of his question. The complexity of relationships among women often eludes men, so I appreciated his sensitivity. Of course, I considered talking to my mother-in-law. She was a wonderful person, even from my perspective as her daughter-in-law. But I didn't want to worry her. She treated me like her own daughter. As I spoke about my mother-in-law, tears welled up, and everyone except my husband grew emotional. It was clear how much everyone loved my mother-in-law. Everyone except my husband, that is. I wiped my eyes and continued speaking. While I was debating whether to talk to my mother-in-law, my husband's behavior escalated. And then, one day, she suddenly passed away. That's how we got to this point. When I finished, Kevin, Tyler, and the other relatives turned their accusing eyes toward my husband. His lies were exposed, but he still showed no signs of concern. He just shrugged and looked indifferent. Does it really matter whether Ray or I lied? I had a business trip and meetings, so I couldn't attend Mom's funeral. That fact remains. Don't blame me. If you have complaints, take them to the company that set me up with Heron Corporation. Brother. How can you say that? You made this mess, and now you're trying to brush it off when things go south. That's not how an adult behaves. I agree, I've overlooked your selfishness and rude behavior because you're my sister's child. But this is too much. This concerns your mother's funeral. It's not something to make excuses about. Despite Kevin and Tyler's anger, my husband ignored them. I decided to play my next card. Everyone, the audio recordings are not the only evidence I have. Please take a look at this. I pulled out a thick stack of photos from my bag and handed them out to the relatives. Everyone gasped as they saw the pictures. Even my husband seemed interested. He moved behind the relatives to look at the photos and finally showed a hint of panic. "Brother, that's you in these photos, right? And who's this woman clinging to your arm?" With Kevin's words, the relatives' shock quickly turned to anger. My husband darted his eyes around. The truth was, he wasn't on a business trip, he was on an affair. The catalyst for me gathering evidence of his abuse was this very affair. He had told me not to call during his business trip because he was on a getaway with his mistress. The relatives glared at him, baring their teeth, but he still tried to deny it. What about these photos? In this day and age, anyone can easily doctor pictures. I have no memory of this. Don't falsely accuse people. It could lead to a lawsuit. He looked around defiantly. I hadn't expected him to bring up a lawsuit. I could see my husband being cornered. One more push. Now was the time to cut off his escape route. If cornered, he would eventually confess and beg for forgiveness. To deliver the final blow, I opened the photo app on my phone. What now? More fake photos? Stop wasting your time. My husband froze when he saw the screen. Displayed were explicit messages between him and his mistress, June. Seeing his distress, Kevin quickly took the phone and read the messages aloud to everyone. "Tom was amazing today. We seem to have great chemistry. Stella gets me all worked up. She's a bad girl. I'll have to give her a good spanking next time. I'm so embarrassed. I'm so looking forward to it. Here comes the werewolf." Kevin read the messages in an exaggerated tone, switching between a falsetto and his normal voice, fully embracing the role. Even though the content was serious, it made me want to laugh. Love really is blind. The conversations of lovers not meant to be read by others can be painfully cringeworthy. In a word, it was just plain embarrassing. "Stop. Don't read my love letters out loud." Finally, my husband raised his voice. He's known for his quiet, insidious way of blaming others, but now he was red-faced and flustered. It felt immensely satisfying. Why do you have this data? Don't you respect privacy?" Breathing heavily, he started to cool down. As expected, a man known for his gloomy demeanor couldn't maintain his anger for long. "Why, you ask? When you started looking down on me, you began repeating phrases like business trip and important meetings. You were also coming home less and less. Naturally, I got suspicious. Whenever I asked for a reason, you would shut me down with 'I'm the one supporting you.' So, I had to find out for myself. If you'd come home reasonably often, I might not have taken it so seriously. But you were hardly ever home, so I knew something was up. I used your finger to unlock your phone while you were sleeping." Just then, a message from June came in. "You were quite the wild wolf, so I documented the evidence. I also checked your computer and followed you on your so-called business trips. It seems a werewolf needs to be monitored, or else he might transform under another moon. As a result, I was able to photograph you too on your trip, and it was very successful." My husband's face turned beet red. The room filled with muffled laughter. Tyler, too, was shaking with laughter but soon composed himself and turned serious. "Tom, my sister tried her best to give you all the love she could as a mother. She might not have been perfect, but she certainly loved you. Instead of repaying that love, you let your affair prevent you from attending her funeral. Isn't that a betrayal?" "I think so too. Mom must be deeply saddened in heaven. She cared a lot about Ray. When Dad passed away, she rushed over and was so grief-stricken. But now, she didn't even show up for the funeral." "It's just too much," Kevin said. Kevin and Tyler both spoke the truth. The other relatives nodded in agreement, completely isolating my husband. Yet, he stubbornly held his ground. "Does it really matter? It's just an affair. Ray is my property, after all." "What? Brother, what do you mean by that?" "Tom, didn't my sister teach you about the nature of a marriage?" "Yeah, She spouted some nonsense, but it was too long-winded to remember. Basically, she was a lazy bum with no right to lecture me. This left everyone, including me, stunned with our mouths agape. My husband continued his self-serving monologue, oblivious to our reactions. They contribute nothing to society, create nothing new, just repeat unproductive tasks. Yet, because they've lived a bit longer and happen to be my parents, they're allowed to act all high and mighty. What a selfish system, this parent-child relationship. Ray and Mom are just parasites living off men. At that moment, I thought everyone's blood would boil over. A loud bang echoed in the room. It took me a moment to realize it was the sound of me slamming the table. I've had enough of your nonsense. Are you even a human being with blood in your veins? Your mother, who wasn't related by blood, treated me like her own daughter. Don't you understand how much she cherished you? Kevin and Tyler stared at me with wide eyes. I had never shouted this loudly before. My throat hurt from yelling, and my hand hurt from slamming the table. But what hurt the most was thinking about my mother-in-law, who couldn't get through to her son. Despite being yelled at, my husband smirked as if watching a strange creature. I began to think he might be sick. All right, have you said your piece? Honestly, both Mom and Ray, you housewives sure do love to ramble. You should learn how to speak more effectively. Anyway, I have no intention of continuing this relationship. So, I don't care what you say. You mean divorce? Exactly. I'm going to start over with Stella. The divorce wasn't a shock. I had already considered it when I discovered his infidelity. However, his next words were beyond comprehension. So, hurry up and give it to me. Give what? What are you talking about? Seeing my puzzled expression, my husband smiled and explained. The inheritance, of course. Huh? It wasn't just me, all the relatives erupted in outrage. Kevin's face twitched, and Tyler's veins bulged in anger and disbelief. What's with the surprise? It's obvious. I'm Mom's biological son. The spouse and children inherit. Dad died before our marriage, so the biological child gets the full amount. That's guaranteed by the law. While my husband's claim was technically correct, his audacity to demand the inheritance after betraying his wife and disrespecting his mother was outrageous. Perhaps such audacity was why he could commit adultery in the first place. I started to analyze my husband in my mind, but stopped myself. It's a waste to use precious brainpower on a man like him. The only thing fitting for my husband is ruin. And that's exactly what I'll deliver. Sorry to disappoint you, but you won't be inheriting anything. The inheritance from your mother is going to Kevin and me. What? What are you talking about? Kevin, maybe, but you're just an outsider. True, your mother and I aren't related by blood. But there are ways for non-relatives to inherit. On the other hand, being a biological child doesn't guarantee you get the inheritance. For someone who looked down on me so much, you sure need to study more. Can't help it. My brother is a wolf full of worldly desires. He can't think of complex things like a human. Kevin chimed in, backing me up instantly. This perfect synchronization felt better than anything with my husband. My husband's face turned red again. I started to worry he might have a stroke. Considering we were still technically married and I would have to deal with the aftermath. Better he collapses after the divorce. Quit the nonsense and explain why I can't inherit. If you're just bluffing, you know what will happen. Don't worry. The only one in for a rough time is you. Here, this is the notarized will. As you said, by inheritance law, you and Kevin are the legal heirs. But a will is another method of distributing assets. If the will contradicts the inheritance law, the will takes precedence. I showed him the notarized will, and he finally recoiled. But then he seemed to realize something and started smirking. I get that a will can leave assets to someone else. But I'm still a legal heir. I have a reserved portion, right? I was surprised he mentioned the reserved portion. Clearly, he was more meticulous about money than I thought. Tyler looked at me worriedly, but I smiled back. There was no need to worry. My mother-in-law had seen through everything. Yes, legally, half of the inheritance portion is reserved for the heirs. But that only applies if you're an heir. What are you talking about? I'm her biological son. I've heard that line before. Being a biological child doesn't automatically make you an heir. You were disinherited. My husband finally froze. The truth was, my mother-in-law noticed the abuse I was suffering. Around the same time I started investigating his affair, she confided in me. With no need to hide anything, I told her everything. Hearing it all, she decided to disinherit him. My husband stammered a protest. Can this even happen? An outsider inherits while the biological child is disinherited. Family should inherit the assets, right? He looked around for agreement, but no one nodded. In fact, Kevin and Tyler firmly disagreed. Family isn't a convenient word to be used however you like. Real family is about mutual care, not blood. How is deceiving your spouse caring? You only care about money. Real connections can't be measured in money. You have no right to call yourself part of this family. The relatives surrounded my husband, their cold stares piercing him. Many of them were strong and imposing, creating a significant sense of intimidation. Yet, my husband still refused to apologize. All right. This is too much for me. I don't need the inheritance or any part of the estate. Just divorce me as soon as possible. My only goal is to remarry June. With that, my husband quickly left the house. The remaining relatives, though feeling awkward, showed concern for me. Ray, I'm truly sorry for my brother's actions. I don't know how to apologize enough. I'm so ashamed as his uncle. We'll catch Tom and make sure he apologizes directly. What kind people? It's hard to believe they're related to my husband. I smiled warmly at both of them. Please, both of you. As for my husband, let's just watch how things unfold. Even if we do nothing, he's already finished. The relatives tilted their heads in confusion. Months later, I suddenly received multiple calls from my ex-husband after our divorce was finalized. I noticed immediately but didn't feel like making it easy for him. I prepared a luxurious breakfast, enjoyed it leisurely, completed my chores, had lunch out while shopping, and indulged in afternoon tea before finally answering the phone. Ray, it's me. No thank you, I don't deal with scams. No, it's Tom. Help me. I'm really in trouble now. Amused by his rare panic, I decided to tease him a bit. But not wanting to prolong the conversation, I got straight to the point. I've been demoted. Apparently, I angered a client company's president. But I have no idea why, and Stella has disappeared. She won't answer her phone. I think something might have happened to her. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. Even now, he's protecting Stella? How naive. I decided to reveal the truth about her. Stella is the daughter of the president of Harine Corporation. And she's engaged. So, your relationship with her was seen as one-sided. The president views you as the man who stole his daughter. That can't be. We were destined to be together. Don't you get it? You were just a fling. Now that you're a burden, Stella has disappeared. Why are you telling me this now? If I'd known sooner, this wouldn't have happened. I answered matter-of-factly. Of course, I knew everything and kept quiet to make you regret it. What? You bitch! You useless parasite! How dare you? My husband finally snapped. The man who always quietly criticized now shouted angrily, his face red with rage. It was oddly refreshing. You always spoke so condescendingly, but now you're shouting. It feels quite liberating. But blaming me is unfair. After all, didn't you tell me not to speak without your permission? That depends on the time and place. Can't you understand that, you useless woman? All right. I don't have the hobby of listening to your insults, so I'm hanging up. As I tried to end the call, my husband's tone changed abruptly. Wait. It was my fault. Are you really apologizing now? I was stubborn. I'm sincerely sorry now. Please take me back. No. I replied curtly, and I heard a scream from the other end of the line. I knew why he was panicking and why he suddenly wanted to reconcile. You have debts, don't you? You spent a lot of money preparing to marry Stella. How do you know that? I found out while gathering evidence of your affair. You visited consumer finance websites and researched loans on your computer. It was clear you borrowed from multiple companies. His plan to make me pay his debts had failed, leaving him desperate. Seizing the opportunity, I delivered the final blow. In the end, you're a selfish liar. You always said you were supporting me, but without me, you can't do anything. I didn't earn money, but I supported you in ways you couldn't see. You don't deserve your mother's inheritance. I will never forgive you for disrespecting such a kind woman. Don't contact me ever again. My husband had no response. This time, I hung up for good. Finally, all the battles were over. My heart felt as clear as the bright, blue sky. After being betrayed by Stella, whom he trusted, my husband became mentally shattered and resigned from his company. Being disliked by a major CEO spread bad rumors in the industry, making re-employment difficult. Now, he survives by working part-time. Naturally, lacking money for living expenses and debt repayment, he tried to borrow more. Unable to get loans from consumer finance companies, he eventually borrowed from dangerous sources. However, part-time wages couldn't cover the repayment deadlines, and he now lives a life of hiding from debt collectors. As for me, later on, Kevin and Tyler came to apologize on behalf of the family. I expressed my gratitude for their support. Then, Tyler shared an unexpected truth. The truth is, my sister was also heavily mistreated by her husband. What? So, did Tom adopt the wrong ideas from watching his father? That's possible. But that doesn't excuse his actions. This conversation made me reflect once more on the nature of marriage. A few years later, I was fortunate to remarry. I am now living a truly happy life. Marriage is about equality and mutual care, as my mother-in-law used to say. My past marriage is a bitter memory, but it gave me the chance to deeply contemplate the essence of a marital relationship. Looking at the man smiling beside me, I believe I've found my own answer. We're gonna live with you. I was in the process of buying a house under my name and getting ready to move when out of the blue, my mother-in-law, who had just barged into our place, came up with an outrageous idea. I'd been relentlessly bullied by her. Every time I visited their house, I was made to work like a mule. Though my father-in-law never did anything himself, he seemed to be riding along without stopping his wife. She probably intends to live with us and exploit me. Determined not to let this happen, I revealed a shocking fact to them. Huh? I'm single, you know? Upon realizing that I was single, my in-laws were flustered, but they continued to badmouth me. Someone who was witnessing this got even more furious. My name is Jessica, and I'm 33 years old. I work as a regular employee in a major company. My husband also works in the same company, and we've been married for 2 years. I met my husband at a company party, and it seems he fell for me at first sight. He asked around to find out which department I was in and started making moves on me. Initially, I wondered who he was, but seeing him come to see me and invite me out every day, I felt reassured and thought it might be fun to be with someone who pursues me so persistently. I accepted his confession. After dating for about 2 years, we happily tied the knot. We were supposed to have started a blissful married life. Life with my husband was going really smoothly. Since we both worked at the same company, it was easy to coordinate schedules, we shared household chores, and we even went on trips occasionally. I truly feel grateful for marrying him. Except for one thing. That would be my husband's parents. When we visited them before our marriage, they seemed very kind. And I thought we could build a good relationship. But as it turns out, they were quite the opposite. It was some time after we got married. My husband and I happened to have a day off together, so we decided to spend it relaxing at home. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? We didn't expect any visitors or deliveries that day, so I was curious about who it was. My husband said, "I'll get it," and headed towards the door as if he knew the visitor. Well, this is a spacious apartment. But there sure are a lot of stairs. It's hard with my bad knees. Oh my, Jessica, you're lounging in sweats on your day off? Please don't embarrass my son with such a casual look. Entering the living room with my husband were my in-laws. Without saying anything, they just sat themselves down on the couch. As you can see, they had an attitude, often making snide remarks towards me, acting as if they deserved respect. While my father-in-law never directly caused any harm, he seemed to be riding along with his wife's behavior. Hey, why'd you invite them on our day off? We had plans to relax together, remember? Sorry, they just insisted, and I couldn't say no. Ugh. Fine, but you could have told me. I've always faced various harassments from my mother-in-law. Every time something happened, I consulted my husband, so he's aware that things aren't great between me and his parents. But, since he's an only child and feels the duty to honor his parents, he's hardly ever stood up to them on my behalf. Good grief, can't modern wives even serve a simple cup of tea? While my husband and I whispered to each other, my mother-in-law loudly and indirectly demanded tea. Even though she came over unexpectedly, they're such shameless people. I'm sorry, I'll get it ready right away. Normally, you'd have it ready before we arrived. I started preparing the tea in the kitchen while ignoring my mother-in-law's snide remarks. They ended up staying at my place until the evening. Because of that, I had to prepare lunch for them too. This ruined my day off, but there are other bad experiences with them. One day. Hey, Jessica. What? My mom's having a tea party this weekend and has invited some neighbors and relatives. She wants us to come too. Honestly, I didn't want to go. I knew if I went, they would make me do all sorts of chores. However, if I didn't go, I knew she would make snide comments about me later. Considering the situation, I figured it might be less stressful to help out than to face her remarks, so I reluctantly decided to attend. I wish my husband would just decline on our behalf, but I knew it would be pointless to say that. Then, on the day of the tea party, we were called in earlier than the starting time. Hello. You're late. It's common courtesy to arrive 20 minutes early. Oh, come on, Mom. The roads were busy. Cut her some slack. David, you can relax. Jessica, get to work right away. I'm furious at how sweet she is to my husband, but how tough she is on me. As I expected, I ended up preparing all the treats for the tea party. It's not that I can't cook, I do it all the time. But the quantity she demanded was just too much, and it took a long time. During that time, she just sat and watched TV without helping at all. The treats are ready. Really, Jessica? It took you this long just to make a few snacks? You're too slow. Even though she's never properly made snacks herself, she had the nerve to make such snide remarks. Considering the amount she demanded, I finished making them in a relatively short time, yet she never thanked me at all. Furthermore, I realized she deliberately increased the quantity to hassle me. For the record, while my husband and father-in-law were preparing cushions and chairs for the guests, they didn't help me with the cooking. She made several other snide remarks while I was preparing, but I tried to ignore them for the sake of my sanity. Then, the tea party began. Many of her friends and relatives gathered. For me, this was pure torture. Whenever guests complimented the snacks, she would say, "I made them." I was a bit unsure, but I'm glad you liked them. Even though she didn't help at all, she took credit for my work. Moreover, when the topic of discussion shifted to daughters-in-law, she made up stories, saying things like, "My daughter-in-law treats me like a slave." It was very uncomfortable for me. After the tea party ended, I had to clean up everything, and she even asked me to clean the room. I felt like a maid. Holding back tears, I thought to myself, I'm never coming here if she calls me again. But life wasn't that easy. The tea party seemed to be a big hit, and it became a regular event. Especially, many said that they loved the snacks. "Jessica, there's another tea party next weekend. Please come." "But I have work that day." "You can take a day off, right? Are you trying to embarrass me? If you don't come, I'll make sure you get divorced." She called me unexpectedly and insisted I come. Even when I said I had work, she showed no mercy. I didn't have the courage to oppose her and felt threatened by the possibility of divorce, so I always obliged, taking days off from work. As a result, I ended up working tirelessly for these tea parties and taking frequent leaves from work, which made things uncomfortable at my workplace. I was mentally drained. Whenever I discussed this with my husband, he just said, "Come on, she doesn't mean any harm. Just let it go." He never really helped. Before I knew it, I found myself constantly pondering how to break free from this miserable life. The answer I came up with was to get a divorce. It meant separating from my husband, David. Honestly, I grappled a lot with the decision. Even though I felt betrayed by David not helping me, a part of me still loved him. But I didn't want to continue a life tormented primarily by my mother-in-law. By divorcing, David and I would essentially become strangers, eliminating the need to interact with my in-laws. The only remaining issue was whether David would agree to the divorce. "I don't want a divorce." "What's gotten into you all of a sudden?" he asked. "I can't stand dealing with your mom anymore. You know what our relationship with her is like, right? I get it, but that doesn't mean we have to divorce. I love you, Jessica, and I want to be with you forever." "I feel the same, but I can't bear it any longer. How about we get a divorce on paper, live separately, but still stay in touch and maintain our relationship? What do you think?" Hesitantly, David agreed. And so, due to the malicious actions of my mother-in-law, we ended up getting a divorce. Life post-divorce was truly peaceful. Having submitted our divorce papers gave me the push to change my cell phone model and number, which stopped the incessant calls from my mother-in-law. David continued to live in our previous apartment, while I rented a new one, ensuring unexpected visits from my in-laws ceased. Life without interacting with my in-laws was great, but something was missing. The married life with David. Even after the divorce, our mutual affection meant neither of us was satisfied living apart. Then, an idea struck me. It was a risky plan, but I decided to give it a shot. As a first step, I immersed myself in my work more than ever before. Before the divorce, I'd often take time off due to dreadful tea parties, but after explaining my situation to my colleagues post-divorce, I regained their trust by dedicating myself fully to work. Eventually, I achieved a savings of $500,000. Since college, I had enjoyed saving money, dreaming of buying my own home someday. Having finally saved up $500,000, I felt confident about buying a decent home. I quickly reached out to David to discuss buying our dream house. "A house? It's gonna cost a lot. How are you gonna handle that?" "Don't worry about it. I've saved up. How about we visit some show houses on our next day off?" And so, we planned a day to visit show homes. David, amazed by my savings, expressed his gratitude, making me feel my efforts had paid off. "By the way, let's not tell your parents about the house just yet. We'll inform them when the time is right." "Got it." Knowing them, they might make things complicated. Reaffirming our wish to get back together, we steadily made preparations for our dream home. After some time, we visited various model houses, discussing preferences like, "It'd be nice to have an outlet here, I prefer this kitchen layout, and I'd like a kitchen with a view of the living room." Considering future children, we kept their needs in mind. Finally, the blueprint was completed and construction began. Discussing the budget with the contractor, we made sure it stayed within $500,000. Our house is gonna be here. David mused. I'm excited. Speaking of which, have you made up your mind about our plan? For us to live happily in our new home, it was crucial to ensure there'd be no interference from David's parents. David needed to either convince them to keep their distance or cut ties altogether. I'm sorry, I just can't make up my mind yet. You know, I'm an only child. Of course, I understand all the terrible things Mom did, but I owe her for raising me, and I'm worried about what'll happen to her if I'm not around. I can't forgive my in-laws, but I do understand how David feels. Well, it's up to you, David. I bought the house under my name, and since we're divorced, you don't have to force yourself to come here. I let him know. Now, it's up to David to decide. We parted ways that day. I had some time before the new house was ready, so I got back to work and slowly prepared for the move. Regardless of David's choice, I was ready to give his parents a hard time. Either way, my plan seemed to be working out. After getting home from work that day, I continued my moving preparations. Then, my phone buzzed, indicating a new message. It was from David. Good job! Seeing the message from David, I smirked. Things were looking like they'd head towards the best possible future. After a while, my dream house was completed. It turned out great, just the way I wanted it. Seeing the finished home made me realize the magnitude of this purchase. But, just because the house was ready doesn't mean I was content. The real challenge was about to begin. Since I had been preparing to move even before the house was ready, the movers smoothly transported all my stuff to the new place. After the move, I went to the apartment where I used to live, and where David now lived alone. I sat at the dining table in the living room and soon heard a flurry of noises from the entrance. The moment had come. David brought his parents. It's been a while. Why haven't you invited us over? Young folks these days have no manners. The ever-complaining in-laws headed towards the living room. As soon as they saw me, Jessica. We heard you were on a long business trip, but you're here. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Sorry about that. I just got back yesterday and was too busy to reach out. Of course, I never said anything about a business trip. I had lied to them for this very moment. Well, all right. But you bought a house, right? And spent a lot of money? It's pretty spacious. Maybe we should live with you. As expected, my mother-in-law latched onto the house purchase. She claims she's doing us a favor by moving in, but it's clear she just wants to boss me around. Indeed, living with you two would be more comforting. You bought the house for us, right? I had to bite my tongue to not laugh out loud at my father-in-law's remark. David silently observed the situation. Please take a seat, we need to discuss this. I served them tea as they sat down. Oh, finally being hospitable, my mother-in-law said, taking a sip of her tea. I thought, this is the last time I'll entertain them. Now, about that new house. Exactly. You bought it for us, right? I'm looking forward to living with you too. But I'm single, you know? I hadn't told the in-laws that we'd divorced. To dodge my mother-in-law's unreasonable demands, I had lied about going on a long business trip. Single? What do you mean? Aren't you married to David? What nonsense is this? Are you making fun of us? Upon hearing the truth, they were furious. Exactly as I said. David and I are divorced, so I'm single. The house is under my name, so you can't live there. I decide who lives in my house. We never heard about any divorce. And the sudden business trip seemed fishy. Thanks to you, I've been made a fool of. Watch your actions, young lady, and take responsibility. So you betrayed not just us, but David too? Divorcing was the right decision. When I firmly stated that I couldn't live there, my in-laws bombarded me with sarcastic remarks and complaints. Hearing this, my husband David finally lost his temper. Enough. Stop badgering Jessica. Back off. My in-laws were shocked into silence, apparently not expecting such an outburst from their own son. The reason we were heading for a divorce in the first place was because of you two. That's a cruel thing to say. I was only thinking of Jessica. Thinking of Jessica? After constantly belittling her and forcing her to attend those ridiculous tea parties where she was treated like a servant, making her miserable. How is that thinking of Jessica? Jessica isn't your convenient maid. She's my cherished wife. And because of you two, our life together is a mess. Stay out of our relationship. On the day we were packing for the move, I received a message from David. I'm really sorry for everything. I've decided to cut ties with my parents. I had thought that he didn't truly love me because he never helped out before. Hearing David's true feelings, I almost burst into tears. I was their only child, so I thought they'd be lost without me. I owed them for raising me, so I never said anything. But I've reached my limit. I'm cutting ties. Don't come near Jessica and me ever again. Is that how you talk to your parents? People who hurt my beloved wife don't have the right to call themselves parents. Don't say that. I'll try to improve my relationship with Jessica. I didn't trust my mother-in-law's words at all. After hearing what David said, you can still say that? Do you want to hear this? I opened a voice memo on my phone and played a recording. It was a collection of the snide remarks my mother-in-law had made to me. There were also a few from my father-in-law. Their faces went pale as they listened. If you try to approach us again, I'll take this to a lawyer. That's how it is, so please leave. And by the way, we've already canceled the lease on this apartment, so showing up unannounced won't do you any good. With that, David ushered his parents out, and they left dejectedly. That marked the end of our long struggle with my overbearing in-laws. Afterwards, David prepared for our move to our new home. Rumor has it that word got out in their community, and they became the talk of the town. I wondered who could have leaked it, only to find out David had told some close friends about the situation to ensure his parents wouldn't overstep their bounds again. I hadn't thought of that, so I almost gave David a standing ovation. For my part, David and I reconciled, resubmitted our marriage license, and are happily back together. The strategy one had in mind worked perfectly. Now, we're comfortably settling into our dream home. It was quite an investment, and given the uncertain circumstances when we bought it, I was nervous. But living here happily with David, I feel it was worth every penny. And then... No way! What's up? Look at this! Is this? To our surprise, I was pregnant. Our future as a family of 3 in this house isn't far away. Though challenges lie ahead, we want to be good parents to our child, learning from the mistakes of David's parents. Marriage is like a graveyard, isn't it? It was supposed to be my big day, my wedding. Yet, out of the blue, my mother-in-law, Linda, started spewing ridiculous things. To make matters worse, she laughed arrogantly and threw water on my wedding dress. The atmosphere for the rest of the ceremony felt like a funeral, completely dampening the celebratory mood. The folks from William's family just stood there, snickering and watching the scene without stopping Linda. A year after that hellish wedding, I got my chance for revenge. My sister-in-law is getting hitched. Would you believe it? The date of her wedding is the same as mine. I'm thinking of giving her a taste of her own medicine with that life's graveyard comment. My name is Mary. I'm a newlywed in my early 30s. I had registered our marriage when I was 30, but the wedding was planned for 2 years later, once we'd saved enough money. My husband, William, didn't seem too interested in me. Whenever I tried to talk to him, all I got was, yeah. So, even when I had something I wanted to discuss, he wouldn't listen. For 2 years, I had to tolerate something. It was the harassment from William's family. Is it meat pie again today? Didn't you have a meat pie just last week? If you keep eating only meat pie, aren't you gonna lack proper nutrition? You should cook more balanced meals. It's not fair to Son. Linda, my mother-in-law, would come over daily to inspect my meals. She never came in the morning, perhaps because William was around, but she'd always show up around lunchtime. I started living with William 2 years ago, and since then, Linda's been visiting every day. The reason? Our houses are incredibly close. Our place and Linda's are just a stone's throw away, about 50 yards apart. Many might be wary of living so close to their in-laws, anticipating issues. But I was completely fooled by Linda. Before our wedding, she was so sweet, always saying, "If you ever need anything, just let me know." Indeed, when I'd discuss issues about William, she'd respond, "That's not okay. I'll talk to him about it." She always seemed to care. That's why I thought living nearby wouldn't be a problem. But when the real life kicked in, Linda turned out to be a stereotypical meddling mother-in-law. It wasn't just about the food. She'd nitpick on how I cleaned the house, placed dishes, and all the minor things. At first, I thought, well, she's the elder, and complied with her requests. But when I mentioned this to friends, they were like, "That's not right. She's totally bullying you. She's nitpicking for no reason, just to annoy you." I hadn't known the bullying by a mother-in-law really happened until then, so I decided to look it up online. When I did, I found stories that mirrored what I was going through with Linda. So this is what they call bullying by a mother-in-law. That's what I thought. I decided to no longer take everything Linda said to heart. "This dish isn't good. It needs to be less salty." No, William's job is physically demanding, so he needs a bit more salt. He loses minerals when he sweats. The moment I decided not to let Linda dictate everything was the first time I think I ever talked back to her. After that, maybe she didn't like my attitude, and she started visiting less frequently. Now in our second year of marriage, we were set to visit my in-laws for Thanksgiving Day. Since Linda's visits had become infrequent, I thought it would be good to show our faces. Being the holidays, my sister-in-law was also home. She had been living with her boyfriend since college, coming home only during extended breaks, making her visits special. But this holiday was different. There was a growing animosity towards my sister-in-law. For some reason, William had to work during the holiday, so he would be joining us later in the evening. I received a call from Linda telling me to come early and prepare the meal, so I went shopping at the grocery store and market early in the morning and arrived at the in-laws' house around noon. Upon arrival, my sister-in-law was already there, sitting at the table with my father-in-law and Linda. I assumed they were having lunch, and when I looked, there was clearly some expensive sushi. "Oh, you're early. There's none for you, so you better start preparing dinner. And it better be better than this sushi." "Come on, Mom, don't be so hard on her. But please, make a nice meal." My sister-in-law's makeup was heavier than before, and she got her nails done. I knew she had a job, and I wondered if those nails were suitable for doing daily chores. It was clear that Linda and my sister-in-law intended to annoy me, but I didn't care since I had eaten a delicious poke bowl during my shopping trip. I did as I was told and started cooking. But then I overheard them saying, "Isn't she super unfriendly? She's always been like that. William should have married someone cuter." Well, at least the makeup helps a bit. The three of them were speaking their minds. I was a bit hurt, but I couldn't let them see that. If I showed them I was upset, it would just make them happier. By evening, when William arrived, for some reason, there were barbecue platters on the table. I made dinner just as I was told. "Why are these here?" To which I got the response, "Did you really cook anything? You came in the evening and didn't do anything. What's this supposed to prove?" Roast chicken, salads, and a beef stew that had been simmering for hours should have been in the fridge. I opened the fridge, but it was empty. "Hey! Don't go rummaging through someone else's fridge." I realized I had been tricked. After I had finished cooking, I went back to our house to fetch something I had forgotten. I thought a few minutes would be fine, but I had underestimated them. I didn't know who did it, but I suspected it was Linda. Both my sister-in-law and father-in-law were smirking at me. They probably all knew Linda had thrown out my food. It was so frustrating. I never told William about the way I felt or the troubles with his family. Then, on our second wedding anniversary, we decided to have a wedding ceremony. Surprisingly, William seemed excited about the idea of a wedding, and he helped out with everything, from choosing the dress and venue to creating the guest list. Of course, his parents were on the invite list. I figured it was a wedding, so they wouldn't cause any trouble. Boy, was I wrong? On the wedding day, I regretted being so naive. The ceremony began with the gathering of attendees, and then it transitioned into the reception. After changing outfits, we headed to the place. When I met William's gaze, he was staring intently at me. Is there something on my face? Oh, I had to reapply my lipstick earlier. Is it smudged? I asked, but he didn't respond. After a moment's thought, he whispered, You look beautiful. I never expected to hear those words from him. In the 2 years since we married, no, considering the 5 years since we started dating, William had never called me cute or beautiful. The only times he really made me feel special were when he confessed his feelings and proposed. I was distressed about his family's behavior, but that one sentence from William made me feel like the wedding would be a cherished memory. Then, we started having dinner. Glancing over to where his family sat, everyone looked casual, but they seemed a bit loud. Those around them were constantly looking their way, and their laughter was audible even from where we were. It was unsettling, but I felt relieved when the staff intervened and they quieted down. Then, it was time for the first dance. However, that's when things took a turn. We danced, and everyone at the place started dancing following us. And my in-laws reached us. I thought to myself, just keep a smile on, just for today. Thank you all for coming today. As I told the grateful feeling to them, Linda suddenly threw her drink towards me. I was taken aback, but the screams from those around me brought me back to reality. Looking down, I was drenched. Confusion swirling, Linda, laughing loudly, proclaimed, Marriage is the graveyard of life, isn't it? Ever since they got married, my son's become so distant and she doesn't even cook him decent meals. If this isn't a graveyard, then what is? She continued. Why are you doing this? I asked, but she simply responded, I feel sorry for my son. My sister-in-law and father-in-law standing next to her were laughing as well. The whole hall was abuzz, everyone unsure how to react, when William suddenly spoke up. Enough is enough. Never had I heard such a loud voice from the usually calm William. And I bet others hadn't either. They looked furious. I've been patient enough. Leave now. Grabbing Linda's arm forcefully, he began dragging her out. Ouch, ouch! Don't do that! Linda cried out, but was ignored and led outside the ceremony hall. My sister-in-law and father-in-law hurriedly followed. Concerned, I went after them and outside I saw William sternly telling them, I'm cutting ties with all of you. Don't ever interfere with Mary and me again. Can we talk? Yeah, let's not let your emotions get the best of you. William, please calm down. Despite their collective pleas, William ignored them all. He shoved them into a cab and sent them home. I was dumbfounded by the scene, but William came over, saying, I'm really sorry. I didn't want our special day to end up like this. The reception couldn't continue in such an atmosphere, so it was cancelled. The guests were treated to sweets instead. Back in our private room, I honestly struggled to grasp the situation. Sure, the wedding being ruined was a shock, but I hadn't expected William to get so angry. Why were you so mad? I thought you weren't that into me, I remarked. He looked a bit sad as he replied, Can't blame you for thinking that. I'm just bad at expressing my feelings. As we talked more, it became clear he wasn't ignoring me. He was so smitten that he'd often get lost gazing at me and miss out on what was being said. He'd nod in response just so it didn't seem like he wasn't listening. What? It was like that? I couldn't help but be shocked. Moreover, William was aware of the harassment from my in-laws. Seeing me not discuss the harassment, he'd occasionally warn his entire family about their behavior. I hadn't noticed any hint of this at all, but now that I think about it, there were times when the harassment seemed to stop. I told you when I proposed that I love you, Mary. That's never gonna change, and I promised to make you happy. This ain't exactly happiness though. That day, we both cried until the morning. For the next year, William tried his best to ensure I didn't have to face any difficulties. Thanks to his efforts, my stress was reduced a bit, and knowing William was on my side gave me strength. However, the harassment from the in-laws didn't stop. Moreover, they'd target times when William wasn't home to come over to our place. If we didn't respond, they'd leave snarky letters in our mailbox. Even if I tried to avoid them, such days continued for a while. I was sad that the in-laws ruined our wedding, but I was happy that William had always been by my side. And for the first time, I realized how comforting it was to have just one person on my side. Since then, William seems to have kept his distance from his family, but they frequently try to get in touch. However, neither of us responded to them. Then, there was news that William's sister, Lily, was getting married. The wedding was planned for a few months later, and without learning from the past, they sent us an invitation. Despite being frustrated at the insensitive sister, I came up with a plan. When I discussed this plan with William, he said, "Sounds good. People might talk, but remember, I'm always with you, Mary. Just let me know how I can help." Honestly, I was hesitant about executing the plan, but hearing that from William was reassuring. A few months later, I decided to execute the well-thought-out plan. We both attended Lily's lavish wedding. And I held on, waiting for the right moment to put my plan into action. I had given a DVD to the event staff beforehand, asking them to play it once I signaled them during the speeches. Lily had requested a speech from William, but when the time came, he didn't stand up. Seeing the staff flustered, I stepped up. "May I take his place?" Lily and her parents were taken aback, but the atmosphere didn't allow for them to say no. I opened up the prepared podium and stood in front of the microphone. "I'm truly happy for Lily's marriage. However, previously, your family used to say, marriage is a graveyard. What do you think about that? I never thought marriage was like that, but I never imagined you'd do something like that." As I raised my hand while speaking, an image was projected on the screen behind me. It was footage we had taken, thinking we'd watch our wedding ceremony later. The video showed Linda, my mother-in-law, pouring water during the dance, and my father-in-law and sister-in-law laughing at the scene. The nasty words of Linda could be heard as the audio played back. From this footage, maybe marriage really is a graveyard. Or perhaps, getting involved with the family feels more like a graveyard. The next video showed my mother-in-law and sister-in-law harassing me. I secretly recorded it with my smartphone, thinking it might be useful someday. I never thought it would come in handy in this situation. My husband and I will cut ties with his family. I apologize for ruining the important wedding ceremony. But we wanted you all to know what kind of people they are. Excuse us. Ignoring my furious in-laws and sobbing sister-in-law, I left the venue. Outside, William, who had left as part of the plan, was waiting for me. "You did great. How about we go grab something tasty?" After eating, we headed home. The next day, we received numerous messages and calls from Linda and Lily, but we didn't respond. However, after countless calls, we decided to pick up once. On the other end, Linda was furious. "Where the heck are you right now? I went to your place, and some strangers are living there." It seems Linda came over to our house, realized we weren't there, and gave us a call. It was evident strangers would be there. After all, we had already moved out. William had suggested it when we planned to play the footage at my sister-in-law's wedding. Since we live close to our parents' place now, if we're gonna cut ties, maybe we should move somewhere they won't find us. Knowing them, they'll probably come to our house. I totally agreed with William's idea. William had been considering changing jobs, and the timing seemed perfect. He started job hunting while I searched for a new place to live. Both the job change and the move went smoothly, and all that remained was to attend my sister-in-law's wedding. After achieving our revenge, we headed to our new home, where we had already moved our belongings. We hadn't told anyone we were moving, and the new place was so far away that you'd have to take a plane. We believed there's no chance the in-laws would visit. However, to be safe, we had asked our neighbors not to tell anyone our whereabouts. As expected, Linda tried asking around, but nobody spilled the beans. Even though I wasn't saying anything, Linda kept talking one-sidedly.
Are you listening? If you moved, just say so. What are you gonna do about us now?
Linda was referring to the monthly allowance we used to send. Both William and I had decent incomes, and we had been sending money to the in-laws every month. I knew at some point that they were using our money for fancy sushi. But since I hadn't discussed it with William, he continued to send them the allowance. But after this incident, I told William everything, and he decided not to send any more money. We had been giving them money even before we got married, but after our wedding, our combined income gave us some financial comfort. William had consulted with me about the in-laws facing financial difficulties. I had agreed to increase the amount and continue the monthly allowance even after our marriage. However, in reality, they weren't struggling at all. They just made us send money so they could live lavishly. As the years went by, they saved less and could no longer live solely on their pension. In the end, it seemed they were relying solely on our allowance. Whether they realized its value after it was gone or whether they were genuinely struggling, they demanded,
"Send us money and tell us your new address."
We had no intention of telling them our address, let alone ever meeting them again. I hung up the phone from Linda without saying a word. After that, whether I blocked her number or not, she kept sending me messages to see how things were going. According to the messages, after Lily's wedding, her fiancé had apparently confronted her quite harshly. Lily's fiancé was what you'd call well off in general terms, and my in-laws were expecting some financial support from him. However, once he found out about the incident at my wedding, he was furious and demanded to know what had happened. Lily claimed it was all Linda's doing, but there was footage of Lily laughing along. The fiancé declared he couldn't marry someone like that, breaking off their engagement. Naturally, the talk of financial support also fell through. The flustered family was expecting some financial help from us, but since we found out that the money was being used for luxury, that plan failed. Lily, who had been living with her fiancé, was kicked out and now lives with her parents. She had planned to be a homemaker after marriage, so she had already quit her job. So now, their income is just the pensions of Linda and my father-in-law. Knowing them, they probably don't have much savings. But the land where their house stands is quite spacious, so I guess selling it could fetch a decent amount. As a result, my in-laws decided to sell their home. Though they moved to a small one-bedroom apartment, for some reason, Linda keeps sending me detailed messages about their situation. Is she trying to guilt me into sending money? I don't feel sorry for them, and when I talked to William, he said, "It's annoying when they send messages like, 'Don't you feel bad for us?'" As for William and me, we were engrossed in our new jobs in a new place. William had switched jobs. And I set up a new company. A matchmaking agency. The incident with my in-laws was the catalyst. At the matchmaking agency, it's crucial to vet potential partners and introduce them to suitable matches. Dealing with my in-laws made me realize the importance of family. Even if someone seems perfect, their parents might not be. Having been through it, I believe I offer sound advice to those who come to the agency. Sometimes, they may need to be prepared to cut ties with their parents. In fact, almost everyone who found a partner through the agency has thanked me, saying things like, "I'm so glad I joined this agency. I had some non-negotiables, but I realized that if I changed, it wasn't a problem. I talked with my parents, and we agreed that we need some distance in our relationship." In fact, keeping some distance has helped many daughters get along with their mothers. "I owe it all to your advice, Mary," many have told me. Yet, while we're busy with our work in this new place, I sometimes wonder about my in-laws. I occasionally feel curious about how much they might be struggling now. But no matter how big their issues might be, we've decided it's none of our business. So, I plan to keep their number blocked, and I have no intention of reading any future messages from them. I'm aware that the events at the wedding have had a profound impact on my in-laws. But that's a result of the choices they made. William and I are living the life we chose for ourselves. And we believe that's what matters most.